Welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast from www.englishwithkirsty.com. Here I'll be sharing with you tips, information and other learning resources so that you can improve your business English. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 158 of the English with Kirsty podcast. And today I decided to go back to something I haven't done for a while, and that is to answer a question because I've done a lot recently about strategy, about language learning, tips, that kind of thing. But sometimes I'm asked questions by my students or people who are in the Facebook group or who come to the Facebook page or people who listen to the podcast. And sometimes I like to take a session to answer one of those questions if I think that it would help somebody else as well or some other people on the podcast. So today we're looking at one of the Wise Old Owl questions, and you'll recognize these episodes and blog posts because they have a picture of the owl on it. I just wanted to do something to make it easy for them to be spotted so that you know what they are. And these are the Wise Old Owl answers questions that people have about English, about grammar, about vocabulary. So if you have a question for the Wise Old Owl, then you can go to the show notes page, which is englishwithkirsty.com/podcast/episode 158. And I'll read that again because somebody did mention that I read links very quickly. So I'll do that again. englishwithkirsty.com/podcast/episode 158, or so you can use the form on that page to send a question for the Wise Old Owl, or you can send an email to podcast@englishwithkirsty.com. And remember, Kirsty is Kirsty, so podcast@englishwithkirsty.com, or use the form on the show notes page. So this question was about receiving feedback, receiving replies, and so the question was, why can you say I have received a reply but not a feedback? You can say an answer but not a feedback or an information. Why is that? So one of the basic things that you learn when you're learning English is the a and an rule. So it's not actually whether the word begins with a vowel, it's whether the word begins with a vowel sound, because you can have a word like hour and we say an hour even though that begins with an H, but you don't say an horse, it's a horse. So both of these words begin with a H letter, but what's important is how the word sounds. So the word hour sounds like it begins with an O, and that's why it's an hour. The word horse definitely begins with an H, it has the H sound at the beginning, so it's a horse and not an horse. So for indefinite articles, which are these words like a and an, we know what we should put before them if we know what sound the word begins with. And also it's the word that comes directly after the a or an. So if you have dog, it's going to be a dog, but if you have an old dog, then we look at the sound at the beginning of the next word, which is old, and so it becomes an old dog, not a old dog. So that's, most people understand that, but the problem is that sometimes English treats nouns as uncountable nouns, whereas in other languages they are not, they are singular nouns, and that's something to watch out for. So we have words like information, that's uncountable. We can have lots of information, some information, not a lot of information, but we don't have an information. That's just not a thing that you can have. And you can have an information sheet, for example, and if you're looking at words like feedback, they behave the same. You can have some feedback, no feedback, lots of feedback, but you can't have a feedback. You can have a feedback form, that's fine. A feedback email is also fine, but some of these words that we have, they're already treated as plural and non-countable, so you can't say you received a feedback or you received a information. And similarly, because we treat them as plural, we don't add an S to them. So equally, you don't have informations. I often see translations of German texts that have been translated from German into English, and they say like for further informations, and that's not right because it's further information. It's already treated as plural, so we don't add this plural S. Same with feedbacks. We don't talk about feedbacks. We talk about feedback because it's already treated as plural. You don't need to add another s. So even when people understand these rules about indefinite articles and when you use a and an, you can still get caught out if you think a word is a singular noun and in English it isn't. Other things like that are, furniture, for example. You can have a piece of furniture, but if you're saying you're buying new furniture for your house, then it's furniture, not furnitures, because we already treat it as a plural. And pollution. We don't say there is a pollution. There is some pollution. There is a lot of pollution. But we don't treat these words like singular words because they're not countable. It's just furniture, pollution, feedback, and information. So this episode is a bit shorter. I will do some of these shorter episodes. I know some of the other ones have been a bit longer recently because I've been trying to go into more detail about a topic and a way of doing something. But I also want to still do some of these shorter ones because I think it's important to share information that people have asked me for if I think it will help other people. And so again, if you have a question for the Wise Old Owl, let me know by email by using the contact form. And if you'd like to sign up for the newsletter, English with Kirsty does have a newsletter because English with Kirsty isn't only the podcast, there's a blog, and there are often other things that are just for newsletter subscribers. So if you want to sign up for that, you can go to the show notes page that I told you about, which is englishwithkirsty.com/podcast/episode 158. Actually, the newsletter link is on all of the episodes, but this is 158. And it's also englishwithkirsty.com/tips. You can find the newsletter there as well. So I hope that's useful, and I hope you have a good week and have fun learning English. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the English with Kirsty podcast. If you have any questions or comments, my email address is kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com, or you can go to www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, where you'll find information about the individual episodes.